Ladies and gentlemen, we are now into the final tier list, Oscar tier list of the first 25 years of the films of the century so far. And we now wrap this up with the at least 24, because there was not really a year. Obviously, this category did not exist in the year 2000, but from 2001 through 2024, all of the 104 nominees for Best Animated Feature. So, obviously, of course, this category will be turning officially 25 this upcoming Oscar nomination season, starting obviously next week when the nominations will be announced. And before we get to find out what those nominees be, let's look back in this category for the past 24 years and see how many of them have aged pretty well in their nominations and how many have not. Now, one thing to note, I have done a big, massive retrospective already on the 2010 decade in the animated feature category. So, basically, there's going to be a whole, almost like a fast paced wrap up thing. So, I'm not going to go really much into detail about this, but a majority of them will be more on the 2000s and obviously this decade so far, with the exception of some that I already talked about in the non Best Picture Top 8 Movies retrospective as well as obviously two of them are Best Picture nominees. So, once again, of course, this is all in my opinion, so if you're upset that some of these are not in the correct tier list, well, that's your opinion, not mine. So, starting up in the inaugural year, not 2000, but 2001, we start this up with Nickelodeon's Jimmy Neutron Boy Genius. Which, first up, I just want to mention, rest in peace to the voice of Sheen in the movie and in the entire Jimmy Neutron franchise, Jeff Garcia. He unfortunately passed away this past December. So, one thing to note is that I'm more familiar watching the show more so than the movie itself. And even though obviously technically the pilot came first with the Runaway Rocket Boy back in '98, and then obviously this film, and then the show, I am putting this one in B. Yeah, obviously animation not really that fun, and Debbie Debberry had not gone on her full Jimmy Neutron character yet when she did the role for the first time. Well, and I think also the short film, but this was like before she got it professionally more on the show itself. Um, but it is definitely obviously the characters, and obviously I have a lot of fond childhood memories watching it. Even on the when on television when the movie was airing on Nickelodeon, and they did like a character commentary with Jimmy Sheen and Carl. That was pretty nice, especially when every time when the popcorn thing was mentioned. I'm sorry that I'm getting a little off topic, but yeah. So yeah, it's been a while since I've seen this movie, and here we go again with that start. But I do have fond memories, nostalgic watching this one, but more on the show, more so than the movie. Next up, we begin our Pixar rounds with Monsters Incorporated, Pete Docter's directorial debut. Although it didn't win animated feature, oddly enough, as this is kind of technically many people said the Disney Pixar Award, and this was during Pixar's classic era. Um, it's odd that it did not take the win, even though it did one for original song for If I Didn't Have You. I do have a lot of fond nostalgic memories of it. I am putting this one in A. And then, of course, we come into the winner of that year, Shrek. I already had talked about this in the non-Best Picture Top 8 tier list video. That goes in A. If you want to know more of my thoughts about it, check out part 1 of the non-Best Picture Top 8 tier list video. On to 2002 with Ice Age, the debut feature of Blue Sky Studios. I am giving this one a B. Once again, the animation not really that well done, but I do have a lot of fond memories when I was a kid and when I used to have the DVD of the film. Just looking at some of the deleted scenes and obviously some of the journey aspects, especially the ice scene, is always the best part, and obviously Scrat is a lot of fun. But yeah, there are a lot of moments now a couple of scenes that are not really that fun when it's not really what's in the journey or prior to the journey, but it definitely has a lot of nostalgicness as well for me. Then we come into Lilo and Stitch. I've not seen the remake yet, although I probably will have to. even though it's not going to get nominated for a single Oscar, but I probably will have to because I usually watch a remake of a movie, um, if from an Oscar-nominated movie. So that's unfortunate. I don't have to watch the sequels though because they all went straight to video. But Lilo and Stitch, I really had a lot of fun time with this film. I am giving this one. I'm gonna give it an A as well. I mean, I think probably the only critiques I would have are maybe just some of the scenes, some of the human scenes that just kind of doesn't really affect me a lot. But I do really enjoy like all of Stitch moments. Obviously, the message of Ohana, which of course means family, and the climax is really amazing, and just all the characters, and obviously the music is fantastic, like Hawaiian Roller Coaster Ride, Winona's rendition of Elvis's Burning Love. And I obviously had a lot more of a nostalgicness watching the television series when it aired on Disney Channel, especially more nostalgic of the theme song. Aloai Komanai, is that how it's pronounced? Yeah, that's the only thing I do remember about that. But I've yet to see the remake, even though I'm not really looking forward to watching it. Now, one of the more bland animated films I've seen from DreamWorks, Spirit Stallion of the Cimarron. Oh my gosh. I was kind of shocked that none of the characters do talk. I'm kind of surprised about that. It's just Matt Damon just narrating in it, but although the animation really looks nice, but I have to give that a D. It's just so bland. And now we come into the first non-English film to win the category, Hayao Miyazaki's Spirited Away. Obviously, Miyazaki was not there at the ceremony because he refused to attend after when the U.S. decided to go to war with Iraq. Thanks, President Bush. Okay, so I did saw this like 2 years ago, I believe. Now I know many people have considered this not also one of the best animated films ever, but they consider it the best winner in the category's history. I will say this right now. I do like it, but I don't consider it one of the greatest animated films ever. So yeah, if you're wondering, I'm putting this one in B. Let me just give my criticisms I have here. I think the first half hour of the film is a bit slow. I mean, if that was cut down to like 15 minutes, if it was more of a faster pace, I think I would have liked that a lot more. And I also have a bit of a mixed feelings with the voice casting, with the performances in both the main dub and even the English dub. I think it was just the voice for the actress gave in the main antagonist of the film doesn't match like the design of the character. I would say, um, and I would even say having the voice actress of Lilo voicing our main character in the English dub, I don't think it was the voice also did not perfect match well with the design as well. I think that could be the thing. But I would say as soon as when we get our first scene with the guy with the multiple arms and all these little cute little kind of like almost like sea urchin kind of creatures that's when I think the movie starts to get good, and then finding out like how interesting this bath house works, and also with No Face and how he is as a character, not really an antagonist in role, but it's just so unique in how it is brought. That's really well done. It's just I think the first half hour and some of the voice performances kind of prevented me from putting this in S or double S tier. And next up is Treasure Planet, also from Disney Animation, like Lilo and Stitch, from John Musker and Ron Clements, a passion project, but their biggest bomb ever in the studio's filmography. Wow. It's very unfortunate because it is really, really good. I am giving this one, I'm gonna give this a B, but it would be a B plus. I do prefer it over Spirited Away and Ice Age. I just really love that massive heart connection between John Hawkes and Silver John in this film. It just really works well. Although I will admit, some of the build up of the story, the world building, and a bit of some of the characters like Ben do kind of a bit annoyance a bit, and maybe some of the animation could be a bit interesting. But I do think the heart of the film really does something, and the whole journey of the whole Treasure Island journey in the use aspect for a space theming sci-fi twist was pretty unique. And now, continuing on with Walt Disney Animation Studios, we go into Brother Bear, which was the Third and final film that was made at the animation studio at Walt Disney World at Hollywood Studios, alongside with Mulan and Lilo and Stitch, which I forgot to mention. And just seeing, obviously, the photos that were released last year that the studio still, like, they kept the preservation of what the studio looked like all those years after it closed. That's just amazing. Of seeing that when the remake came out, that was just amazing to see. They kept a historical artifact at Hollywood Studios. As in, just in terms of the movie itself, with Brother Bear, I have to give this an E. I think my massive problem is the story really kind of is the massive issue, and maybe the dialogue of the whole journey itself doesn't really work well. Although, even though the use of colors is well done and the soundtrack is pretty good, especially On My Way and Welcome, those are two really great songs from the soundtrack, I will say. The thing about it is, I have more of a nostalgia of playing the video game on my computer when I was a kid. I mean, playing the video game of Brother Bear on my computer was a lot more fun than the movie itself. I mean, I think it's just like, yes, it's just like a whole journey, but you're playing in the journey and all the obstacles and stuff like that, especially that unique snow race. Even though I'm talking about a game here, even though that's not in the movie, by the way. But that's just kind of a very fun mini game I like to play even before I went to school during those days when in between after we drop up on one of my sisters at the bus stop, and then I was like, we still had time before. It was like during my elementary days, and I was like, I would just get on the computer and play that snowball race in the Brother Bear PC game. But so yeah, I have more nostalgic with the video game more so than in the movie, and yeah, I also think the beginning portion was very very odd to me. And then of course we got to our winner, Finding Nemo. I don't need any explanation. That is going in S tier. And then we're into Sylvain Chomet's The Triplets of Belleville, which also earned an original song nomination for Belleville Rendezvous. I am giving this one a B. It is an interesting journey how this mother uses this actual famous triplets to save her son that is trying to be one of the greatest bike riders ever from this mafia group. I mean, yeah, the character design may be a bit weird, but that's in Chomet's style. But I think it's just the whole build up to rescuing her son with these famous three ladies that are now old doing the song again. And just seeing how these triplets are now, what they are doing years later as just old ladies, kind of almost rebranding themselves to who they were. But it is a pretty unique historical rescue mission. On to 2004 with our winner, The Incredibles. I also talked about this film. I am putting that one in A. And now we are coming into Shark Tale. I think this one needs no explanation. Easily, in my opinion, without a doubt, the worst film nominated in the category's history. And then we're into the better DreamWorks movie, Shrek 2. And like with Monsters Inc., like with Finding Nemo, I have a more of a nostalgia mix when it comes to Shrek 2. Mainly, I think, through the DVD, obviously with the iconic menu, of course, and then how this, I think, is massively better than the first film of just now understanding, like, Shrek's time of understanding his relationship with Fiona, this time, and more about Fiona's side of how almost a what if scenario of things would have been completely different if he didn't rescue her. Like, obviously that would be more in Shrek Forever After, but more specifically, if the Prince Charming was there before Princess Fiona did, and obviously how both the king and queen and the fairy godmother are kind of shocked about this, especially King Harold and the fairy godmother. Um, and then obviously with the new recruit with Puss in Boots, a great new recruit for Shrek and Donkey, and everything how making Shrek into a human, which really still looks good to this day. I mean, even though that was early computer animation, but he still looks great as a human in that film. And obviously with the massive DVD featurettes I played as a kid and Far Far Away Idol, I have to put this in S. On to 2005, the only year where no computer animated films were nominated, and one of the only 2 years Disney was not nominated. So let's start this up with Studio Ghibli's Howl's Moving Castle, Miyazaki's follow-up to Spirited Away. I ended up liking this a lot more than Spirited Away. I am giving this one an A. The way how Miyazaki adapted that novel and making a story of this woman trying to find her way to get her back to her youth side, and also figuring out all the problems that are going on around the castle and stuff like that, and just seeing all the situations that are going on through. It's been a bit since I've seen the movie, but both its main dub and the English dub were really well done, and the animation was really spot on. Then into Tim Burton's Corpse Bride, which did mark Tim Burton his first Oscar nomination. I am giving this one an E. I think I think it's maybe how the story was told, and I don't know how the bride I felt about with that character specifically, because or basically all the characters and stuff like that. Not much on the animation, of course, because that's Burton's style when it comes to the realms of stop motion. The only thing I do like about this movie is the opening number from this musical, According to Plan. That's the only good thing about that film. And then into Wallace and Gromit: The Curse of the Were-Rabbit, from Aardman, and technically also DreamWorks, as this was their second collaborated film they did, the first being Chicken Run and then Flushed Away. I'm sorry to do this, but I have to give this a D on this one. Now, I am not a big Wallace and Gromit mark. I'll explain a little bit how something changed a little bit when we get to their sequel. But when it comes to Curse of the Were-Rabbit, prior to it, I did watch the first 3 shorts and the Cracking Contraption shorts. I just really couldn't get into maybe the dialogue or with Wallace's personality or with. Obviously, I can understand with Gromit being a great mute character, but I think it's just maybe with all the other characters that we get in this movie, and I think the humor could be the biggest reason. Now, obviously, this satires the horror genre, of course, and finding out who the Were-Rabbit was. Um, Even though the climax was very interesting of how the twist comes in about the Were-Rabbit's reveal, I just think maybe the humor is just the reason I didn't took to the movie, and maybe because the story kind of took a little bit too slow. On to 2006, and we begin this up, of course, with Cars, and the final Oscar nomination for the disgraced John Lasseter. I am giving this one, I'm giving this an A, and the thing is, I also do have a nostalgia-ness for the first Cars. I almost did collected a couple of the diecast range. In fact, I really wanted to become like a big diecast Cars collector, like how I was with the Thomas Wayne Railway line, and what I'm doing now with the physical medias of Blu-rays and DVDs. No, not DVDs, but just Blu-rays in general. But I really did not get that far, obviously, and I know, unlike the Thomas Wooden Railway line, the Cars diecast line, whew, there's a bunch, and that could, I don't think I would not be able to collect that much, but there are some great ones out there, like Piston Cup Productions, that is a fantastic collection when he does, and other people as well that we have seen, whether it be like custom mades or like prototypes or canceled items. It's just pretty unique. In terms of the movie itself, I really still did enjoy this, even more so now as an adult. Like, yeah, I can understand why it's considered the weakest film of the classic era of Pixar, because there's really not really much, like, a lot of suspense or, like, a lot of moments that occurred that all the other films in the classic era do, like big action moments. It's just, like, more of a subtle, calm thing, like, around Route 66, and just understanding the personalities and the whole community and stuff like that. And Paul Newman in one of his final roles as Doc Hudson, really fantastic. And the climax at the Dynaco 400 really is well done. And then we come into Happy Feet from George Miller. So the man behind Mad Max won an Oscar for this film, and I do agree with the Academy on this one. I am giving this one an A as well. I think I was kind of a little bit surprised how much I did took to Mumble's story on how obviously he tried to manage to save his entire community, obviously with the subject of climate change at the time, and the way how he revolutionized a bit with his tap dancing skills when he was unable to pass the traditions of his other brethren penguins did, all because of what his father did at the beginning. and also his entire journey of trying to figure this out and also impressing somebody, it's really, really well done. And the animation really still looks good. But if there is one animation style that I'm really kind of not fond of how the style looked, Monster House from Gil Cannon. This is gonna be some people, but yeah, I just don't get Monster House. I'm sorry. Uh, I think the other kid, like the one who almost like in the red cape or something like that, the like not I can't really the big kid specifically, like the main character's best friend specifically is a bit of annoying, and how the whole story of the houses end up becoming is just very, very odd. And obviously with Buscemi's character kind of having a little bit of revealment that would go on later on, it's just I just it's just very odd. And then although the climax just seemed a bit odd how the house went, it's just I just don't like this movie. And then we're into 2007, and we go with the last animated film I'd watched and the last Oscar movie of the 2000s decade that I had to watch for my marathons. Persepolis, the semi-autobiographical biopic of Majan Shatrapati, because there's a couple of compost characters in this movie, of fictionalized versions of of the people she knows. But this is kind of technically a biopic movie, loosely based on the famous novel, of course, that Strabati did direct along with Vincent Paradot with this French film. I am giving this one. I am giving this one a D. The thing about it is now. I do get the whole scenario story of how this Persian woman obviously has to deal with what's going on in her main country, and obviously with the massive situations going on during the massive revolutions that had occurred, especially in the Middle East. But I think it's just like maybe also showing more of the growth of her as a woman could be more of a coming of age scenario. I would say that's the best way to describe it. It kind of doesn't mix well with the political situation going on in the Middle East where she was from. I just think that did not work, and I honestly do kind of prefer the English dub over the main dub. Interesting enough, although the main actress who plays Machan does both the main dub and the French English dub as well, so that's kind of very impressive. She actually managed to do both dubs. Um, I just and like yeah, it is a very creative decision to keep the illustrations directly from the book. That's a pretty creative decision, but I think I think it's just the coming of age aspect kind of is the big reason. And now into Ratatouille. If you've seen my non top 8 Best Picture Oscars tier list, part 2, you know where this is going. If you want to see my thoughts about the movie, just watch that second part. But yeah, one of my all time favorite Pixar films. It's one of the two of them, to be precise. And now into Surf's Up from Sony Pictures Animation from Ash Brannon, who before that co directed Toy Story 2, and Chris Buck, who directed Tarzan and later on directed the Frozen films. Now, I will say that the mockumentary style is a very creative way of doing it, and like making like a documentary and actually having almost the directors be characters in the film of about these surfing penguins, of this kind of underdog surfing penguin story and stuff like that. But I think it's just not really that well entertained, honestly. So I have to give that. I'm gonna give that. Uh, I'm gonna give that an E, but it would be an E plus. Next up, Bolt. From Disney Animation, from Chris Williams and Byron Howard, both on their directorial debuts. I'm giving that one an. I honestly actually did not like this movie as much, so I'm sorry to say this. I might have to give that an F. That's kind of shocking for me to say that. I just didn't really care for the characters or the story or the whole curating in general of how Bolton needs to learn how he actually is not really the dog he thinks he is. The only best thing about the movie is, without a doubt, the credits song "I Thought I Lost You." Not because of Macy's Parade connections or anything like that. It's just a good song. And now into Kung Fu Panda. Now, if you have seen my ranking of the 2011 animated feature nominees I did back in 2020, I believe, you might read what I remembered I said about the first Kung Fu Panda. I think the first one's a bit overrated, so I have to give that an E. I just think, um, I think it's just basically the whole story structure of how Poe goes from one way to the other, and I think it also could be just around the characters. Maybe it could just because of how the way the direction was from John Stevenson and Mark Osborne could be maybe the bigger reason why. I think the directing was kind of a little bit trying to be too much of like every stereotypical kung fu movie instead of like what Kung Fu Panda 2 and 3 would later do on. 4 just sucks. I'll obviously I have mentioned a little bit about Kung Fu Panda 2 when we get to that film. And then of course we've got Wally, and like Ratatouille, this is going to double S tier. These two are my all-time favorite Pixar movies, but which one's the better one? I am not really sure, but both of them are masterpieces one way, shape, or form. And now into 2005 with Leica's debut feature Coraline from Henry Selick. I'm gonna be honest here. I'm giving that an E. I just think Coraline as a character, she kind of felt a little bit of annoyance a bit at the very beginning. And then the whole atmosphere of the other world where she goes into, and the other mother, although very, very creepy of how the animation is, but I think it's a little too much, I would say, with the animation style on her. I think just mainly, especially with the, oh gosh, that scene is just so disturbing. I don't really like that. Next up, Fantastic Mr. Fox, Wes Anderson's animated feature debut. I have kind of talked a little bit about this. I have a kind of hit or miss with Wes Anderson. I do like a lot of his films. The Grand Budapest Hotel easily is best, as you might have saw in the Best Picture tier list video. But his animated films, honestly, I think for me are some of his weakest ones. And since I really don't have memories of the dialogue or the characters, even though the animation's pretty interesting, I'm gonna have to get that in. Uh, yeah, I'm gonna put that in E because it's not his weakest film. His weakest film's easily The Darjeeling Limited. And then we have The Princess and the Frog from Disney Animation, John Musker and Ron Clements' next film, and what was their technical return to hand-drawn animation, but after with the box office failure of the 2011 Winnie the Pooh movie, all because they decided to release it on the same day as the final Harry Potter movie, they don't kind of do that anymore. But wow, I was blown away by The Princess and the Frog from beginning to end. I mean, I really admire all the characters, especially Tiana as a character. Her relationship with Prince Naveen, with obviously I forget the alligator's name. I forget what he was. Ray the Firefly, um, and then Doctor Facilius the villain, and the soundtrack. All the songs in the movie, perfect decision to have Randy Newman do the music because obviously he knows a lot about New Orleans. I was still blown away when I first saw it, and this would have been my pick for 2009. I have to give that an S, double S tier actually. It's a masterpiece. And now into Cartoon Saloon's debut featured film, The Secret of Kells. Now, if you have seen my unboxing video of the Cartoon Saloon's Irish Folklore Trilogy set, I do find The Secret of Kells to be a bit overrated. And I don't really have a lot of memories of the film compared to the other four nominated films from them, three other nominated films, excuse me, that they would later get nominated for. I just think probably not just how the story of the Book of Kells was told, but I think some of the characters and the antagonists were not that great. Even the animation's admirable, but I even remember a lot more scenes in Fantastic Mr. Fox, so I'm going to have to give that an F, shockingly enough. And then we wrap up the 2000s with the second animated film to ever be nominated for Best Picture at the Oscars, Up. I already talked about this in the second part of the Best Picture tier list. I gave that a B. On to the 2010s decade now. Now, this one might be a very fast paced one here because I have already talked about basically all these films from the 2010 through 2019, not just with the rankings I did for 2010 through 2015, but also when I did the individual reviews for the 2016 through 19 movies, and then ranked all the winners in that category. So, of that deck of the 2010s. So this is going to be more of a kind of a summary, I would say, but not really by much. Starting up with How to Train Your Dragon, that is going in S. I really love the first How to Train Your Dragon. Then it's Sylvain Chomet's The Illusionist, which, even though the animation style is pretty unique, I might have to give that an E because I just felt bored with it. And then, of course, our third and most latest animated film to date to receive a Best Picture nomination, Toy Story 3. I talked about this also in the Best Picture tier list video, and that is a B for me, shockingly enough, because I kind of prefer the first two over the third one, because I kind of mentioned I think the first act was a bit slow, in my personal opinion. And then on to 2011 with A Cat in Paris. I really couldn't get into it. I don't remember anything about it. Not even the animation, so I actually might have to get that an F. And then Chico and Rita, technically the first R-rated animated film to be nominated because there is nudity in the film, but they didn't rate it for its US release for some reason. I am giving that one a B. Then it's Kung Fu Panda 2 from DreamWorks, and I am giving that one an S. I end up really liking this. But here's one I do want to mention here real quick, and that is Puss in Boots. If you remembered when I did my 2011 ranking, I didn't really took too much to Puss in Boots. But then I actually had to rewatch it in preparation for Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, and I ended up really liking it the second time, and that really helped for me. So I am putting that one in A here, but it would be like an A plus. And then, of course, we have our winner, Rango. I am also putting that one in A as well. Really creative animation style, by all means. And then we get into 2012, starting with Brave. I think it definitely goes into C. I mean, I love the third act, but I do understand the troubled production history of it. And even though the animation's really cool, and I did had a great theatrical experience watching the film, but yeah, yeah, John Lasseter ruined that film. And then, of course, we've got Tim Burton's Frankenweenie, based on his short film. Really great homage to the horror genre and a lot of his homages he did. Definitely an A on that one. Then Paranorman, like a second film, I'm giving that one a D. I mean, it is a very interesting story, but I think maybe the characters are just really not really that likable or something like that. Maybe it could be just the performances. And then Artman and Sony's The Pirates Band of Misfits, or The Pirates and Adventures in Scientists, if you do live in the UK. One of the only two Sony films that Artman collaborated with. The other would be in Arthur Christmas. Don't really remember anything about this movie. I have to give that an E. Wreck-It Ralph from Disney. I don't think this needs any explanation. That's going to an S. The Croods, a pretty really great DreamWorks film after revisiting years later. I have to give that an A. Despicable Me 2, massive improvement to the first film, and I really liked it as my favorite in the entire series. That will also go into A. Ernest and Celestine, both dubs are really well done, and the animation style, the watercolor, kind of reminds me of Little Bear, the animated series based on the books, with the art from Maurice Sendak. Imagine you take those books and make it watercolored and make lovable characters and great music. That's really great. I have to give that a B. I did also watch the sequel, A Trip to Gibarita. Really good follow-up as well. And then we come into Frozen. I'm just going to leave it and not going to say much. If you want to see what I thought about it, the 2013 ranking, just watch that video. The best thing about it was Kristen Bell as Anna. I really love Anna. That's the only thing I'll say about it. And then as The Wind Rises, what was supposed to be Hayao Miyazaki's conclusion, but not actually, I really felt bored with it, so I have to give that an E. Big Hero 6, I was very disappointed with it. I didn't think it did not needed to win that Oscar. I ended up even liking a lot of the episodes of the show more than the movie itself. I didn't watch the show entirely, but I think I watched a portion of the first season. I think the entire first season, I believe, and yeah, the show is a lot better than the movie, honestly. The Box Trolls easily Leica's weakest film, although Ben Kingsley as Archibald Snatcher is a fantastic villain and the great climax, but yeah, it is their weakest film, so I have to put that in E. How to Train Your Dragon 2, that should have won that. That's going in S tier. Song of the Sea, despite of the rough first half hour, the journey itself really to the climax is really well done, giving that a B. The Tale of the Princess Kaguya, even though it's a lot over 2 hours, but watching in this unique Studio Ghibli style film that Isao Takahata wanted to bring the storyboards to life, and what a way to conclude for his film career, so I'm giving that one an A. Then to 2015 with Anomalisa. Oh gosh. This is not my thing for Charlie Kaufman here. Even in the style of stop motion, I can understand why it was animated because you have all these Tom Noonans all at once, but I think I'm just not big on adult animated films that have nudity on it, except for maybe Chico and Rita, but that's it. But that's not an adult animated film I would go back to. So yeah, I'm putting that in double F tier. I just don't like Anomalisa. Boy in the World, don't really remember anything about it other than the style, so I have to get that in E. And then Pixar's Inside Out, the last film to date so far to receive a nomination in the top 8 categories. I've already talked about that in that tier list video in part 4, and I gave that a B. Shaun the Sheep movie, a very fun movie to watch. I am giving that one an A+, not an S, but definitely an A. When Marnie Was There, fantastic writing of adapting that British novel into a Japanese format, so that's definitely going to be right there. And then 2016, which in my opinion is the best lineup in the category's history. Kubo and the Two Strings, S. That's fantastic. Moana, S. My Life as a Zucchini, S. The Red Turtle, A, but it would be an A+. And Zootopia, double S tier. I have talked about all these films. I mean, it is the best lineup in the category's history, in my personal opinion. And then what many people consider to be the worst lineup in the Oscars history with 2017. And this was kind of notable because this was, for at least 17 and 18, all the members of the Academy had the right to do the nomination balloting for this one, which led into the nominations for some of these films, starting with The Boss Baby. Now, you would think I would put this in double F tier, but have you seen my review? I do kind of like it, honestly. A lot more than a lot of people did, so it's going in B, but it would be a B minus. Yes, I do have a lot of problems with it, but it does have a great heart and great performances. And then The Breadwinner. Oh boy, this was a very heavy movie. This is definitely going into A plus territory, almost an S, but man, well, it's been a while since I've seen that movie, but oh my gosh, it's really heavy and so good how it was told. And then Pixar's Coco, which I think it's, in my opinion, the best Pixar film of the 2010s. That's going to S. Ferdinand, Blue Skies Fall Up. Yeah, I'm going to have to get that an F. And then Loving Vincent, the first oil-painted animated feature. I do not remember anything about it because the story was absolutely confusing. Unlike some of the other films like Persepolis and later with Flea, this one's obviously not really a documentary, but it just doesn't work well. Like, even Waltz with Bashir probably has a lot more understanding than this, so I don't remember a single thing, so I have to give that an F, and it's so confusing. And honestly, I think the oil painting style, I felt like I was watching more of a motion captured film than an oil painted film. 2018, Incredibles 2, not as good as the first film, but I still do enjoy it, so that is going in B, but it would be B plus. Isle of Dogs, I kind of stated with Fantastic Mr. Fox. Wes Anderson's animated films are some of his weakest ones. I do prefer it over Fantastic Mr. Fox, but I would have to give that a D, even though the opening music sequence with the drums was really fantastic. Mirai, the first non-Studio Ghibli Japanese animated film to be nominated. That main kid was so annoying. I have to give that an F. Ralph Breaks the Internet, a massive disappointment on this one. And honestly, the more I think about it, the more I really distaste for it. So I probably would have to give this an E. I was leaning towards D, but I think E is the better option. Like, A Place Called Slaughter Race is probably the only finest thing about it, and maybe the Disney scenes, and that's just it. The Oh My Disney scenes, that could be just it. And then Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, that's going to S tier. That needs no explanation. And then for 2019, How to Train Your Dragon: The Hidden World. I ended up being disappointed on it, honestly, even though I haven't revisited it yet, but I remember not really liking it as much. But I was really disappointed on it. I Lost My Body from Netflix. Despite the main character almost kind of feeling like he stalked the person he loves, but it is a unique technical aspect journey, and I'm giving that one an A on that one. Klaus, a very fantastic origin story of Santa Claus, even though it does have the underdog scenario and Capulets and Montague style, I'd say. That's going in A. Missing Link, one of the hidden gems in the medium of stop motion animation and of the 2010s because it flopped, because it lost a lot of money, because it was released weeks before Avengers Endgame, as I call it, Back to the Future fan service. Fantastic journey. I am giving that one an A as well. And then for Toy Story 4, a lot of people would either agree or disagree with me, but I'm putting this one in S. I end up even liking it more so than 3. Not as strong as the first two, but I end up really was surprised how amazing I was, and it's really, really good. I'm not really sure about Toy Story 5. I'm kind of in the middle because we really don't need a fifth one, but Andrew Stanton behind the director's chair is kind of telling me, okay, I should be stuck in the middle. It's just, it would be his first time handling in the Toy Story realms and in the director's chair, but I just don't know what is going to happen when it comes out in the summer. So yeah, that was kind of more of a quick, fast-paced scenario when it came to the 2010s, because I already did a lot of videos on that decade specifically. But now let's look into the 2020 decade so far, from 2020 through 2024. And we start up, of course, with 2020, the year of the pandemic, with Onward, the last film to be released in theaters before the COVID lockdown in general, in terms of mainstream-wise, and also the first Pixar film technically released under the new leadership of Pete Docter as the chief creative officer, as Toy Story 4 was technically the last Pixar film Lasseter had the credit before his resignation. I ended up really liking this, and I think I ended up preferring it over the winner in the category, the other Pixar film that we'll talk about. I think it's just the journey and some of the performances, and the script was really well taught, which is why it ended up being my personal original screenplay lineup of that year. I am giving that one an A. And then Over the Moon, from Glenn Keane, the legendary Disney animator, and won the Oscar-winning short Dear Basketball with him and the late Kobe Bryant. In his featured film debut of this kind of like Chinese style and stuff like that, of this girl going to the moon with her supposedly new stepbrother, and how she has to deal with the grieving of the loss after she lost her original mother and trying to cope with it, and then with this queen played by Lea Salonga. It's just very odd. Not really fun with it. Even the music was just a bit odd. I'm giving that one. I do remember a couple of the scenes in the movie, and that's probably because I'm not getting angry at it, unlike some of the other films. I'm probably going to give that a D. And then a Shaun the Sheep movie, Farmageddon, I have to give that a D as well. I was really disappointed with the film. I really, really wanted to love this movie. I think probably even the farmer's idea of his Farmageddon show was I rather would watch more of him building that event up more so than the whole journey of Sean and the alien and this like agent trying to capture this little baby guy. I know there is a third one coming and it will be a Halloween theme, so maybe I might revisit Farmageddon prior to it, even though Farmageddon is a standalone sequel to the first film, and I think that the third one will also be a standalone sequel as well. And then Soul, the last film to date from Pete Docter, and obviously he can't direct right now for any films right now for Pixar for his own studio because he's in charge of the studio, so he can't make any movies. So obviously he was making this at the time when he got that promotion to be the chief creative officer. Honestly, I do enjoy it, but not as it fondly as it is. So I have to give that a B. Now, the performances from Jamie Foxx and Tina Fey are fantastic. I think it maybe be the script could be the thing because one of the writers is Kemp Powers and he was a co-director in this film, but he also wrote the Oscar-nominated screenplay based on his play One Night in Miami. And I think maybe with his aspect writing coming into a Pixar film like this, I just think maybe there was something that was not his dialogue might have been an issue for me, even though the actors managed to do that well with their performances. But I think it's just how it was taught in the story could be my only gripe with it. Although the animation's really looking good, and this really almost close, like probably the closest thing Pixar really has gotten close to an R-rated drama. Like you can almost see a character almost swearing here, but obviously since this is a Disney film, it has to be obviously very friendly related. And then we're into Wolf Walkers, the third installment of the Irish folklore trilogy from Cartoon Saloon with Tom Moore, once again, who did The Secret of Kells and Song of the Sea, and Ross Stewart on his directorial debut. This is an S. I love this movie. There might be like a minor issues that prevented it from being in the double S tier, but I remembered I was blown away by it and how emotional I was. The animation is just fantastic and beautifully well taught. And like obviously how the emotional aspect, not just with the story and the direction, but with the performances from the two child actors, Anna Kenneth Faye and Eva Whittaker, and even Sean Bean as Robin's father. I mean, and just the whole climax, how it goes, and just how the relationship between Robin and her father is, and also her best friend, and obviously the whole how the folks of the Wolfwalkers is told in this movie. I mean, and the animation's just so beautiful, well directed. It was a bitch for me not to put Tom Moore and Ross Stewart in my personal director lineup. They were like a number 6 for 2020. They should be in there, but in the lineup of 5, they were just on the edge of on that lineup. But it is one of the best animated films of the decade, without a doubt. Now into 2021, and oddly enough, I might consider this the second best lineup in the category's history because I did like all 5 of them. Not amazement levels like 2016's was, but still pretty good. Encanto, our winner from that year, I am giving that one a B. The thing about it is, the story is really well great. I really love the script. The script itself managed to get in my personal lineup of that year. And some of the songs are pretty good, especially Dos Oruguitas and We Don't Talk About Bruno. I mean, they're great in context, especially We Don't Talk About Bruno. Yeah, it should. I don't know why Disney did not submit that song prior to the deadline. Yeah. The only thing is, some of the characters, especially Maribel's Abuela, seems not really that likable, or some of the other characters around her, or like maybe even her sister Isabella. Um, and how Bruno's setup is just like when we see Bruno in general in the movie, it just like John Leguizamo kind of felt like he's just out of character or something like that. And the ending was a bit rushed. Then we have Flea, the first documentary film to be nominated in this category. I have already talked about this in the international lineup, and you can even say someone in the documentary lineup. This would have been my pick for 2021. I am giving that one an A. And then Pixar's Luca, a unique friendship coming of age story of two like sea monsters that are kind of now entering this bike race under their human conditions. Obviously, they have been, and the unique friendship the main two characters have, and the whole bike race. There might be some minor critiques I have. Especially I don't like the casting of Maya Rudolph. I hate Maya Rudolph. She's just an awful award show presenter. Um, but I would give that a B as well. Not one of my favorite Pixar films, but it was definitely one of the better ones of this decade. The Mitchells versus the Machines. I know this is also a fan favorite, but I'm also putting this one B as well. There might be some issues I have with the story and maybe with the villain, but some of the like the whole, but with the father daughter connection story really kind of does work well, even though many people are claiming Phil Lord and Christopher Miller are responsible for this movie, but this is Mike Rihanna's movie. This is not their movie. Same thing with Into the Spider-Verse. It's not their movie. It's Bob Persichetti, Peter Ramsey, and Rodney Rothman's movie. Same thing with Across the Spider-Verse when we get into that. Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs is, the Lego movie is, but not the Spider-Verse films. But just in terms of the movie, dang it, Katie! That is such a very famous quote. Probably one of the most famous quotes in an animated film of this decade so far. And then Raya and the Last Dragon, my favorite Disney film, animated film of that year. I am giving that one an A. I mean, the whole world structure and Kelly Marie Trent's performance as Raya, and how the whole like just the world building and the action just really took so well. So like you have another live action filmmaker with Carlos Lopez Estrada who did the 2018 movie Blind Spotting doing an animated film. So like this is why I like with him and Gore Verbinski with Rango, and then obviously with Wes Anderson and even Steven Spielberg with The Adventures of Tintin, and somebody that we'll get into next here. Lots more live action filmmakers should make an animated film at least once during their career to see how they experience it with. And then into 2022, and speaking of live action filmmakers making an animated film, here is Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio. Easily going to S. I really loved the movie when I first saw it on Netflix. Although the musical numbers are probably the only issue I kind of have with the most, because they're not really that memorable except for the cricket song in the end credits. But the way how the story was told in this unique format of Pinocchio, even though I'll be honest, I have not seen the Disney film, not the remake, I'm talking about the original 40s classic. So yeah, with me not seeing that, that's kind of a bad comment to say that right now. But just with this interpretation of this adaptation is really unique in Del Toro's style. It is unfortunate Mark Gustafsson, who was the other director of the film, sadly passed away a year after he won his Oscar. Having one of the right, having the person I believe behind Over the Garden Wall, the Cartoon Network miniseries behind, and the writer's chair, I think it's Patrick McHale, I believe, or is it Matthew Robbins? I forget, but one of the two. Bring in the writer's chair. That was a pretty creative decision, and it kind of almost feels like that miniseries has brought in the aspect into the movie as well with Guillermo del Toro's style. So yeah, this unique interpretation of the Pinocchio, and also how setting around World War II during fascist Italy is also a really great setting as well. This is definitely my pick, and I agree with Guillermo del Toro. Animation is cinema and is not a genre. And then into Marcel the Show with Shoes On, based on a couple of shorts I did watch on YouTube prior to the movie. I'll start this up right now. I'm giving this a C. The script is really well good. The story definitely has a unique aspect to it, and Isabel Rossellini does give a fantastic performance. But I think maybe the dialogue just kind of might be my massive issue. I think it's more of how the story was paced was probably my issue, and it got a film editing nomination at the Film Independent Spirit Awards, oddly enough. One thing I would like to mention though is that kind of similar to in the international feature category when I mentioned about the Norwegian film Kon-Tiki and the Tunisian film The Man Who Sold His Skin, and you can even say with Flow that they should have been ineligible with Kon-Tiki and The Man Who Sold His Skin, as both those films have primarily English in their language and Flow has no dialogue. I would have ruled Marcel the Show with Shoes On ineligible. I think this movie is more of a live action stop motion hybrid. If the human actors or like Leslie Stahl or Dean Fleischer Camp were not in the movie, if we did not see the live actors or anyone else in general, I think I would have been okay with it. But since there's a lot of live actors, I would have ruled it ineligible. So in general, as a movie, it would be at C, but I would have ruled it ineligible for animated feature. Then we have Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. I was honestly disappointed with this. I really wanted to like this film, and even though the villain of the film is getting on his way to get an Oscar nomination with Wagner Moura, I think it's probably because it's almost like the same feeling I did when I first saw the first Puss in Boots for the first time, and I really did not like it, and I think that could be the same thing with me with The Last Wish. So if there's a third one coming, or if this is kind of like with these characters would come into Shrek 5 if they do, I might want to revisit The Last Wish, I guess, to see how the characters are going to interact with Shrek, specifically Puss, Salma Hayek's character, and the other character, I forgot who was, the like puppy dog or something like that. Then it's the Sea Beast. I am giving that one a C. Animation's really well done, but I think the script kind of is too generic, honestly. There's a good song at least, but I think it's just the animation I think that really is the one that's kind of spot out to me the most. And then Turning Red, and I'm going to be honest, it's probably one of my most overrated Pixar films that I can think of. I have to put that in D. I just felt like, with the exception of the climax at the Four Town concert, which was fantastic, the rest of the movie kind of feels like the same coming of age story that I've seen so many times before. And I think Sandra Oh's casting as Mei Mei's mother was kind of bland, honestly. And now into 2023, and we begin, of course, with Hayao Miyazaki's The Boy and the Heroine. If you've seen my personal lineup of 2023, this did made it on there. I am giving this one an S. This is my favorite Miyazaki movie that I've seen. I have seen, obviously, Princess Mononoke, but I honestly felt cold watching that film. I've yet to see My Neighbor Totoro, or Kiki's Delivery Service, or Ponyo, or Nazca the Valley of the Wind, or even his debut feature pre-Studio Ghibli, The Castle of Cagliostro, so I can't really say about that film. But out of all of Studio Ghibli's Oscar-nominated movies, this is easily the best one. Um, it is a really interesting journey. The best basic summary I have now about it, when I just thought about this now, The Boy and the Heron is basically what Over the Moon should have been. That's what I think of. And obviously, this time you obviously have to deal with the main character actually trying to get in connection with his new mother, and that could be the big reason. And the whole fantasy aspect, journeying with it, I think that's what Over the Moon should have been. And that's what I think Miyazaki managed to make that why Over the Moon was not a good movie, and this film did. So yeah, definitely deserve that Oscar without a doubt. And then we come into Elemental, and I am giving this one an A very underappreciated Pixar movie. I really have fun time watching this, and this is one of those fewest movies that makes me want to be in a relationship with whenever I find the perfect girl for me. Even though I'm 26 years old right now, but for the right woman around my age that would be the perfect match for me, I'm almost feeling like I'm the Ember right now, and whoever that woman would be the Wade for me. Um, Hopefully, we would have that perfect connection. Props to Peter Sohn for making probably the other only true Pixar romance film right next to Wall-E. Even though Wall-E is the true masterpiece, where it primarily doesn't have focus on the main love story because everything going around it, even though that's the main plot. But this one really does well with the perfect love story connection. And Steal the Show is a really great song. I even have an instrumental version of it as my text tone. Next up is Nomona, which is technically the final film from Blue Sky Studios, but was revived by Annapurna Pictures after the movie got canceled when Blue Sky Studios closed down. With the help of Netflix, they managed to bring the movie alive. I am giving this one an A, but it would be an A minus. I mean, Riz Ahmed and Chloe Grace Moretz, a perfect connection with their performances and how the characters do. I think it's just the villain could be my only gripe with the film, and I think it kind of takes a little bit in the journey. It's been a bit since I've seen this movie, but I did have a fun time watching this, and one of the best LGBTQ plus themed movies of this decade so far. So we have another live-action filmmaker that decided to jump into the realms of animation. A Spain filmmaker by the name of Pablo Berger decided to adapt a novel known as Robot Dreams. I am giving this one an E, unfortunately. The thing about it is, now, the movie has no dialogue, and that definitely seemed to work well at first glance. I just think there's not really a lot of music or sounds that kind of goes in well with the characters and how the story is told visually of their relationship between dog and robot just seems a bit odd. The only thing that obviously remembers me the most is the song September, Earth, Wind, and Fire song to be precise. So, like anything, the use of that song, that's probably the only thing I remember the most about Robot Dreams. And then we got Spider Man Across the Spider Verse, the second installment of what would be the Spider Verse trilogy. Whenever Beyond the Spider Verse comes out, if Phil Lord and Christopher Miller respects their animators, even though this is not their movie, because this was Joaquin DeSantos, Kemp Powers, and Justin K. Thompson's movie. I don't know why Joaquin DeSantos was not nominated, because they decided to nominate Amy Pascal, or should I say more likely Phil Lord and Christopher Miller. They did not deserve that, how they treated their animators. And I think probably maybe a lot of the voters heard about that and probably cost them their Oscar, other than being a sequel. I am giving this one an A. I do think it's not as good as the first film. I think it's a little bit too long, but I do think it worked well with the story pacing. And I think the editing, I think, really did work well. I just think there was a lot too much characters that we followed throughout the movie. And obviously, being in part one, we would not know what's going to happen in the second part. And I think Miles' relationship with his parents probably one of the downer sides for me, honestly. But getting to see all more other different types of Spider-Mans that we've seen is pretty unique. But I really wish it was kind of like more about that. But we'll see whenever Beyond the Spider-Verse ever comes out. If Phil Lord and Christopher Miller can respect their animators, we will never know when we're going to see Miles again. And now we're into 2024, and we start this up with the first ever independent animated film to win the Oscar for Best Animated Feature, because we don't technically count The Boy and the Heron and Spirited Away, because any Studio Ghibli film, especially Ghibli films made by Hayao Miyazaki, they're more mainstream. So this is the first legit, truly independent film to win this, from Latvia, of course. I already talked about this in the international feature tier list, since it was nominated for international feature for Latvia. I gave that a B on that one. Next up, what was the highest grossing animated film for at least a half of a year, I would say, until Noja 2 took that over. Inside Out 2, Pixar's highest grossing film ever, but a massive disappointment. I go back to Turning Red even more so than Inside Out 2. I am putting this one in E. I just think Anxiety is just, ugh, I just can't stand that character. And I think maybe the setting of the story of just having Riley during her time at a hockey camp or something like that, instead of like during her time like in middle school or something like that. I think if it was like in several days instead of like a weekend trip or something like that, I think the setting probably would have been a lot better. The only good thing about it was the Oh Pouchy thing, which is a very funny satire joke on Mickey Mouse Clubhouse. That had me laughing a lot. But I couldn't really get into this. I think I even probably might prefer the Dreams Productions miniseries over Inside Out 2. And then we have another R-rated stop-motion animated film after Anomalisa, Memoir of a Snail from Adam Elliott, the man behind the Oscar-winning short Harvey Krumpet and the 2009 film Mary and Max, which I know some people probably would want me to watch because Max, the main character, has Asperger's syndrome, but I've not seen that film yet. I am giving that one a D, honestly. The production design is really fantastic, and it also explains why I should never be a hoard. Even though I do collect Blu-rays, but I don't want to be too far like that. And the only other thing I remember is just the only line I kind of do remember is just potatoes. That's it. That's the only thing that comes out of my mouth when I think about that movie, potatoes. And then we get into Wallace and Gromit: Vengeance Most Foul from Aardman. The second film of this, but it's actually not a sequel to The Curse of the Were Rabbit, but a sequel to the Oscar-winning short The Ron Trousers. This was probably my biggest surprise of last year. As I kind of stated when we got to The Curse of the Were Rabbit, I'm not a big Wallace and Gromit mark. I'm not even a fan of The Curse of the Were Rabbit or even the short after that, A Matter of Loaf and Death. Vengeance Most Foul is easily the best thing about Wallace and Gromit, I think. I think I now understand why people love Wallace and Gromit because of Vengeance Most Foul, and this is almost became a masterpiece and probably my favorite animated film of the decade so far. More on topping over Wolfwalkers, The Boy and the Heroine, and Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio. Not a masterpiece because I had a minor issue with maybe some of the humor, but it is a massive improvement. But it definitely goes into S. It was my number 2 of the year behind Dune Part 2. I mean, it's everything that I now understand why people love Wallace and Gromit. And then finally, we get into DreamWorks' The Wild Robot. This is also going to S tier as well. I really loved this movie. The way how, I forgot what the robot's name was, but Lupita Nyong'o's character, what she does with her relationship with Bright Bill and this fox and all the animals in this naturistic forest and stuff like that. It really, this is easily Chris Sanders' best film. I love what he has done. He is definitely one of the best directors when it comes to animated films. I mean, How to Train Your Dragon, the first one, Lilo and Stitch, the first one, The Croods, the first film, and now The Wild Robot. Man, every time when he makes a movie, he's just so well done. Now, I know there's a sequel that is planning, which I'm a bit worried about it, but the animation's just fantastic. I mean, Lupita Nyong'o's performance is phenomenal. The writing that Chris Sanders does in his direction, it is so lovely. Obviously, Vengeance Most Foul still would have been my pick, but it's definitely in second place, right under Wallace and Gromit. So, in terms of the full recap of this tier list, even though this was only 24 years, since we did not have the year 2000, of course, 65 out of 104 movies I end up liking. 4 of which, of course, ended up being masterpieces. 2 from Pixar with Ratatouille and WALL-E, and 2 from Walt Disney Animation Studios with The Princess and the Frog and Zootopia. Compared to 39 films that were in the bottom, the ones that I didn't really like, don't remember, or find it overrated or disappointed, or I really hated or just didn't like, especially Shark Tale and Anomalisa. Yeah, so I know there's going to be a lot of people that are going to like some of these. There's going to be a lot of people that are going to dislike some of these. But this is one that everyone kind of does have a thing for animation, stuff like that. I don't know how this upcoming year's list of nominees are going to be, because I know that I heard 2025 was a pretty weak year for animation. So we'll see how it goes, but obviously I will not be probably revisiting this tier list maybe until 2030, I guess. If, depending on how long I would be on YouTube, but it would just really depend. But I think that kind of wraps it up for not just the Oscars animated feature tier list, but for the series of tier lists that we've had so far. I can't believe I've managed to get through the 25 years of cinema here. So, thank you guys for watching. If you want to watch all the tier lists, you can follow that on the playlist or check it out on my channel and hit that subscribe button just in time as we get ready for this year's round of Oscar nominations for 2025.